So I recently returned from a visit to Salerno in South Italy. Now, for those of you who don't know, Salerno was the first Italian city that I moved to back in 2018. And it's where I spent 4 years of my life living before ultimately moving to Palermo, where I currently am. Now, Salerno is a city where I learned some of my most difficult lessons. I had some of the most profound growth and personal development that I've ever had. And it essentially provided me with the foundation for living in South Italy. It's an incredible place and it holds a very dear space in my heart. And it felt incredible to go back. In fact, it felt like a warm embrace, a hug from a long lost friend. And I wanted to share with you in today's podcast episode 3 key takeaways that I really learned from this recent trip back, which I think you can apply to you and your life wherever you may be in the world. So the first key takeaway was that everyone begins somewhere. And this was really evident for me because, as I've just mentioned, Salerno was the first Italian city that I moved to. This was my first expat experience. And so it was really the place that gave me the grounding and foundation for living in South Italy. Now, I think in life, sometimes we get carried away with the end picture, the end final result that we want to achieve, whatever goal or objective we may have. And sometimes we forget that actually we don't necessarily arrive at that point straight away. Often there's a journey, there's a process, there's something that you have to go through before you actually achieve the thing that it is that you want. And for me, Salerno was the place that was my starting point. It really gave me that initial foundation and experience for living abroad. And I always say it's the perfect place to move to if you are thinking of moving to Italy, because not only is it well connected to other parts of Italy, so you have the possibility to travel and to explore different cities and towns, but also you are like 35 minutes by boat from Amalfi. Like, you are in one of the most iconic parts of South Italy. Salerno is like a really well connected and serviced city all by itself. You're close to Naples, the Cilento coast to the south. Like, you are in a beautiful part of the world. It's a clean, pristine city. And it's a place which, when I moved to back in 2018, wasn't really as well known as I would suggest it is becoming now. Definitely Salerno is more on the map now, especially with the airport that's opening there this summer, which is going to make it even more accessible for people to reach. But it was just the perfect place to begin my life here in Italy. And I would say that, although I decided to move 4 years later, that was because for me personally, I had gained all I could from that city, and it was time for me to have some new experiences. But essentially, it was my starting point, and it was something that has helped me to kind of have the experiences that I'm having now and experience the growth that I have. So I think it's always good to remember in life that where you begin may not necessarily be where you end up, but you're going to experience so much along the way, and you're going to grow and you're going to learn lessons that you wouldn't otherwise do if you immediately arrived at your end destination or goal. So that was a really important takeaway for me that I kind of reminded myself of from my latest trip. The second takeaway that I had from my trip back to Salerno is that change is essential. And this is something that a lot of people struggle with. People don't like change. They like to stay in their comfort zones or in their routines. But essentially, you stop living when your life looks the same way every single day. And I kind of arrived at that point early 2022 in Salerno. I realized my life was very much same old, and I couldn't see how it could look any different. And so I knew that I had, as I mentioned in a previous episode, reached my expiry date with that city. And it's not because there's anything wrong with it. It's just for me and my own personal self and the way that I am as a person. I knew that I needed some fresh experiences, and I needed to experience life in a different part of South Italy, which is what inspired my move to Palermo. But essentially, I think going back after 2 years, I realized just how vital that change was, because my life, even now here in Palermo, looks radically different to how it did in Salerno. And I've upgraded my life and I've made many improvements on the back of my move here to Palermo. And also I feel like I found myself even more, like I feel even more grounded now when it comes to living in South Italy. So I feel like Salerno was like the kind of discovering myself in South Italy, like understanding who I was and what my life would be like. And then Palermo has been the place where I'm really kind of digging my heels in and feeling a bit more at home. And it's a wonderful thing, because if I had never made those changes, my life would continue to still be the same. And I don't think I would feel half as grounded as I do now if I had continued to stay in Salerno. And there's also the thing that if you don't make changes in your life, at some point you start to feel resentful. And that is when you can start to become quite negative about something which, you know, if you'd made the change, perhaps you would have retained a positive feeling towards. And I liken that to Salerno. If I hadn't decided to leave in 2022, I really do believe that at some point I would have started to become resentful about the city, and I may not have even wanted to return back there in the future, because I would have just felt like I'd had enough of the place. Whereas knowing when the right time to change was, I have retained the love that I have for Salerno, which means that I will always continuously want to visit it, and it will forever hold a special place in my heart. So this is it. Sometimes recognizing when to change things is essential in order to kind of maintain a positive experience or relationship with something or someone. And so that was a really, really important takeaway that I took from my trip back, in the sense that, you know, sometimes we want to feel comfortable and secure, but in that comfort, you stop growing as a person. And so you do sometimes have to experience new things and new places in order to continue growing and developing in your life. And the third significant takeaway that I wanted to share in this episode is that sometimes you have to go backwards in order to go forwards. This sounds really counterintuitive, but essentially, we don't spend enough time reflecting on the journey that we've had in our life. We are often very much focused on the future, on the things that we want to do, the things that we want to have, the places we want to visit. We don't necessarily reflect on how far we've come. Yet when you go back to those places that you used to frequent and you see the people that you used to spend time with, you really are faced with the progress and growth that you have made. And in a way that helps to propel you to move forwards with your life. It's certainly the experience I had, kind of running around Salerno, last week. It felt amazing because, of course, I knew all the shortcuts, I knew the places to go to. It was just incredible. It just felt really comfortable. But it also reminded me of how far I've come, because I was transported back to like 2 or 3 years ago when I was kind of feeling a particular way in a certain part of Salerno. And I was like, wow, look how far you've come in this time. And, spending time with people that I used to know there helped me to see how much I've developed as a person. It was a really transformative experience. And I think sometimes we need to do that more often. We need to reflect on our journey, where we've been, and, maybe even go and spend time in that place or with those people in order to really see how far you've come on your journey and where you are headed, and to give you that kind of motivation and inspiration to keep moving forward. So these are the takeaways that I wanted to share with you in today's episode. If you want to see more of Salerno, head on over to my YouTube channel at Ms. Brittany, and you can see all the content that I'm going to be posting there in the coming days and weeks. I've got content for a couple of weeks for sure. And you can see for yourself just why Salerno is such a beautiful place. And I will see you in the next episode.